Hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Corbett. I'm a psychiatrist and a Jungian analyst and a professor of depth psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara, California. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the series of discussions of depression that will be beginning soon. And what I want to do in these discussions is not simply talk about the ways in which depression can present itself and talk about some of the theories about how depression arises. Those things are important, but what I want to do is broaden our approach to depression. In other words, there are ways of seeing depression as not simply a pathological state. Our culture, especially our medical psychiatric culture, sees depression as always some kind of abnormality. But there are other ways in which depression or melancholia, as it used to be called, has been thought about for a long time. It can be seen as a productive state of mind, potentially, as a stimulus to self-exploration. It's not necessarily always unproductive and paralyzing. It can be seen as a state of the soul, part of the human condition, not simply as an illness. Depression has spiritual or even religious dimensions, as we see in notions like the dark night of the soul. So what I want to do in this series is talk about all these different aspects of depression. I will contrast it with grief, and I will talk about depression and some famous people. I'm going to talk about depression as Martin Luther, Winston Churchill, and Franz Kafka suffered it. I might say something in that context about the relationship between depression and creativity. And I'll mention some of the sort of self-help approaches to depression and ways in which we might be able to help other people with it as well as ourselves. And I'll try and distinguish depression from normal human sadness, which is really part of the human condition. I'll try and describe how depression may present a little bit differently in old age, in childhood, and in adolescence, and talk about some different types of depression. I'll focus on the kind of depression which is due to having a very harsh internal critic, a conscience that's constantly accusing the individual of not being good enough. I will contrast that with what's called an empty depression, where the person feels there's just simply nothing inside, and that's a very painful state of mind. And I will actually critique the purely biological theories of depression and talk about the role of antidepressants. I'll talk about some of the psychological theories about the origin of depression. All right, so, well, I hope that's sort of whetted your appetite about this series and it's stimulated your interest in being with us for these discussions.